Good evening. I'd like to call to order the May 28, 2019 meeting of the City of West Palm Beach Historic Preservation Board. Can we please begin with a roll call?
Amanda Skyer.
Here.
Theodore Aspgren.
Here.
Kristen Kellogg.
Here.
Dan Pickney.
Here.
Takara Chambers. Let the record reflect that Takara Chambers is not present. Gabriel Jaslowski.
Here.
Ken Berslauer. Let the record reflect that Ken Berslauer is not present. Reginald Stambaugh. Let the record reflect that Reginald Stambaugh is not present. Nick Casali.
Okay, we now move on to approval of the agenda for tonight's meeting. Do we have any changes to the agenda as presented?
Good evening, Madam Chair. I do want to make a correction under item 6. Those two cases are intended to actually be consent cases, not continued cases. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any members of the board that wish to modify the agenda as presented? If not, can we please have a motion to approve?
I move we approve the agenda for Tuesday, May 28th.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Moving on to approval of the minutes from April 23rd, 2019. Do we have any changes to the minutes as presented? Okay, can we have a motion to approve?
I move that we approve the minutes from the April 23rd, 2019 meeting.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, moving on to the report of the Historic Preservation Planner.
Good evening, Frederique Mettner, City Historic Preservation Planner. Since the board's last meeting, staff has reviewed 94 applications as a level 1 review, 1 level 2 review, and we've conducted 24 zoning reviews. And a quick update, as you saw on your agenda, there is no award ceremony tonight. It'll be in June to allow all the award winners time to get to the meeting. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We now move on to remarks by the chairperson. The matters before us this evening are quasi-judicial in nature, which means we make our decisions based on competent, substantial evidence that comes before us. We ask you to please keep this in mind when you speak. How this works is for each case, the staff will make a presentation followed by the applicant, and there will also be an opportunity for the public to make a comment, and we ask that you please limit your comments to 3 minutes per person. And afterwards, the applicant may have a rebuttal after the public comment, should they wish to do so. To lead into this, we need to let you know if we've had any conversations outside of this meeting. So we will begin with a declaration of ex parte communications.
I received one email.
Oh, can you turn on your microphone? Thank you.
I received an email concerning the application for 3130 Washington Road, simply asking to meet. No reply was given.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I received an email for the same
Could you please
case.
state your name as well?
Sorry, Gabe Jaslowski. I received an email from the same case, and I didn't have the opportunity to reply to it. I did spoke with Ms. Mittner about it, but I can make my decisions based on the evidence presented tonight.
Theodora Asperger and I, too, received an email regarding case 18-66 for 3130 Washington Road. I did not send a reply and no communication beyond that.
Amanda Skyer, I received the same communications, but unfortunately was unable to get back to the applicants. But I did speak to Ms. Mittner about the cases on tonight's agenda and can make my decision based on the evidence presented.
Kristen Kellogg, I also received an email from the architect for case number 18-66.
I too received the email for case 1866. I did reply that I wasn't certain whether I'd be attending the meeting because of recent surgery.
Okay, thank you. We now move on to the public comment portion of the meeting. If you are here to speak on an item that is not on the agenda, now is the time to do so. Is there anyone here to speak on an item not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the swearing in of our speakers. If you plan to speak this evening, please rise and raise your right hand.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you. Okay, we have 2 consent items, case number 19-25 and case number 19-26. Can we please have a motion to approve?
I move that we approve the items on the consent case. That would be case 19-25 for 2411 South Olive Avenue and case 19-26 for 227 Marlborough Road.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. If you are 2411 South Olive Avenue or 227 Marlborough Road, your case has been approved. Thank you. And now we'll move on to new business, case number 19-24, 220 Grayman Drive.
Good evening, Board. Aaron Borngraber, Historic Preservation Planner. Historic Preservation Case Number 1924, Alterations for Siding at 220 Grayman Drive. This is the project location, highlighted in red. And the request tonight is for installation of Boral True exterior siding and trim to replace the existing original wood siding. 220 Grayman is a contributing structure within the Prospect Southland Park Historic District. A little bit of history about this property. Staff did go out and discuss the work, the proposed work, before the permit was actually applied for and issued. The applicant did apply for the permit, and based on discussion, we approved the permit. However, the scope of work greatly exceeded the work that was discussed. This is an image from Google Street View from March 2011, illustrating the siding that was on the house, as well as the garage. This is from March 2019 for Google Street View, and as you can see, there has been deteriorated siding here. About 10 years ago or so, the siding was partially replaced, and most of that siding has deteriorated. You can also see it here at the lower level. And once again, the garage. Next couple slides are actually photos supplied by the applicant when they submitted the application. This is the north elevation on Grayman Drive. As you can see, the siding has been completely removed. These are other elevations of the structure. And staff did a site visit on the 22nd. This is how the site looks like, the north elevation currently, as well as the garage right here. And the reason why I'm pointing out the garage so much is that it wasn't actually a part of the application or the permit. And it wasn't also a part of any of the discussions that staff had. This is a similar property on the 200 block of Greenwood Drive, and this does have its original wood siding. There is some detail that shows that it has been partially replaced, but it's very minor. The applicant is proposing to use Boral True exterior siding, which is a synthetic product. This is an example of the product. It's not illustrative of its profile or color. They're proposing to use the bevel profile, and True exterior is a product made with fly ash and polymers, and fly ash being a product from coal combustion. Staff has reviewed the criteria for alterations, and this does not comply with the Historic Preservation Ordinance or the Secretary of Interior Standards number 6 or 9. From the photos, there has been some of the siding that has deteriorated to the point where it needed to be replaced. However, not all the siding was to that point, and also that any replacement should be done in kind, so that it should also match not just the visual qualities of the material, but also the material when possible. And number 9, where exterior alterations should not destroy historic materials. So as the application is proposed, it does not comply with the Historic Preservation Ordinance or the Secretary of Interior Standards 6 and 9. However, staff is going to recommend the approval of the application for a certificate of appropriateness and garage. Please include that with the following conditions to bring the project into compliance with the Historic Preservation Ordinance and Secretary of Interior Standards 6 and 9. The first of which, the applicant shall salvage all remaining siding if enough is salvageable from the siding that has been removed and still remains on the property. It shall be installed on the north street facing elevation. And second, the applicant shall install siding that matches the original siding and profile with cedar, cypress, or old growth pine if available. Thank you.
Questions of staff? This is right now, we're not in that portion of the meeting yet. So you will be given an opportunity to speak, sir, in just a minute. Yes, you will. Any questions of staff?
I just have a quick question. Is there any application where you would recommend a synthetic siding in the historic districts?
Not that I'm aware of. Wood siding is preferred, especially when dealing with an actual contributing structure. Both structures are actually contributing, so it should be replaced in kind.
Thank you.
Has this material ever been used in any, is there any history of it being used? And
Not that I'm aware of. Ms. Mittner may be more familiar with that. However, this is a substitute material that is made with fly ash, which coal combustion has been around for quite a number of time, and then the polymers to combine it, so it does have some of a recycled component to it and isn't entirely a non-historic material.
okay.
From,
I know we've approved hardy board on like non-contributing structures before, but never this material. I'm unfamiliar with it. Did you have a question, Mr.
Sure,
Pickney?
thank you. From those photographs you showed earlier, it looked like the siding had been already pretty much stripped off the building. Do you know if there's anything salvageable there to put on the north elevation? Or has it been thrown out already?
I do not know the condition of the removed siding. It was just a condition to try to maintain the historic integrity of the building as much as possible.
Okay, so can we just assume for a minute that this siding that's been stripped has been disposed of? In that case, would you recommend, I can't ask you that, I'm sorry. Would the application then still not comply and?
If all the original siding has been disposed of, the board could just not include the first condition and could just include the condition that either wood siding that is cypress, cedar, or old growth pine, if available, with the same profile, could be approved. And that will bring it into compliance.
Okay.
Any further questions of staff? Thank you. Okay. And you're welcome to go over to this podium to ask your question. If you wouldn't mind going to the microphone there, please. If you could please just state your name. Are you the owner or?
Bernard Lebedecker, I'm the owner. My question was about the house that you used as a comparator that was on the next block over. You had a picture of it? Okay. That house, you're aware, has been dramatically changed, correct?
I was not aware of that. However, it does appear to be wood siding.
There's a whole addition on the back of that house, correct? That goes past the chimney?
That is information I don't have available right now.
Who took that picture?
I did.
Okay. If I look at this house from the sidewalk, maybe 30, 40 feet down, you can see that that house has been added on to, correct?
Potentially, I was focusing on the front when I took the photo.
Well, you were focusing on the siding when you took the photo, correct?
I was not. I take photos tend to be from the front for example properties.
The photos of our houses show both the front elevation and the east elevation that you took.
Correct. In that
Okay.
situation, there was.
If we look at the east elevation of this property, there's an addition where there's siding that's not wood siding, correct?
That is information I don't have available.
Well, I'm curious as to why not. If you went out there and you took the pictures, why didn't you take a picture of the east elevation that shows the addition that makes that house much larger than mine, that shows the other type of siding they
Sir,
use?
may I ask what the point is? That are you trying to
Yes.
say that there's an example
There are
of?
examples of other buildings in this neighborhood. Since we have moved in, we have preserved the house as much as we can in the way it exists. The other building, that house, is the same model as my house, except that they have added to it, I'll say longitudinally, so that behind what you're seeing here, there's a much larger structure. It continues. It's almost twice the size of my house, and my understanding is on that addition, which continues after where the chimney is on my house, they were allowed to use non-wood siding. My other question, basically to the board as a whole, is, and we can bring this up later, and I don't want to be combative with anybody, but we were able to find a case 1606, and I brought copies if the commission would like to look at it.
Yes, if you please could distribute them, thank you.
This is a house that's located in the Grandview Heights neighborhood. The case was decided back in 2016. It involved a 1946 building that was a contributing building. They did allow them to put hardy board on that building. The one thing that I think is significantly different at first blush, but when you look at the facts of our case, it's really not, is this building had already replaced the wood siding with plywood. When the plywood rotted, you allowed them to come in and put in hardy board.
So there was no further original material
Correct,
remaining?
but I want to correct the record as it relates to our property. Most of the siding on our property has already been replaced because we did that when we moved in. It was all rotten, and behind it, it was rotten. Mr. Pitchney, to answer your question about where the original materials are, as we started removing siding from the house, what we found was, like, for instance, and again, these pictures weren't taken for the purpose of presenting our case. Maybe we should have, but for instance, between those two windows on the top floor, everything looks great. But if you look a lot closely, you'll see a line of algae where the wood was continually wetted. And at some earlier date, and I'm not sure when, somebody had gone up there and replaced some of the siding, because when our contractor got like this high on the building, the boards behind that run diagonally, that are more structural, under the tar paper, those boards were rotted. And I can't figure out how that happened, except maybe in a hurricane, water got blown up in there, but this was old damage. And we didn't replace those boards because towards the roof and then farther down, the board was okay, but it was what, maybe 2 or 3 spots, George, where we had a...
Sir, if you wouldn't mind stepping to a microphone, just since this is being televised. I'm not, do those microphones work, or does he need to come over to the podium?
I'm not sure. I would prefer it with...
If you could please go to the podium, please. Thank you.
We actually had to change some of the plywood on the front, the east side, the west side, and we also had an area so in the back as well.
So, you know, even though the siding looks okay, I suspect either there was water getting behind there that we hadn't, that nobody had noticed, or somebody had replaced some of that siding in the past, because, like I said, the wood boards behind it were rotted to where we had to actually remove some of that and replace some sidewalk with plywood. Some of it we just left up there because most of the board was good, even though there might be a spot 6 or 8 inches where it had been rotted out. The third thing is that we had pretty bad termite damage in this building. Since my wife and I moved in, we've spent close to $80,000 replacing siding. Because when we first moved in, we hired a contractor to replace the siding and the rotten board underneath, and that was $30,000. We've lived there since, I want to say, what, honey, 2001? 2000. I have done it after every single hurricane. Windstorm does not cover paint, and when the adjusters come out and look at the wood siding, they tell you either it was not put on properly or it was rotten, and they're not going to pay for it. So we've had to pay that out of our own pocket after Francis and Jean and out of Wilma. And each time, between the time it takes to put it up, the painting supplies, scraping everything, tearing off the old plywood, or tearing off the old siding, I think each one of those jobs after those hurricanes was $10,000. We're now getting ready to spend another $30,000 or so to get it done again. We are big fans of historic preservation. We did not do what the folks in the picture that your staff showed you did, which is come to you and say, we want to do a huge addition on the back of the house so that our kids can all have their own bedrooms. They share bedrooms. We've kept the configuration of the house the same. We can't continue to do it. There's a lot that was left off of staff's report about this house. The foundation is going. There's metal in the concrete. That metal is spalling, and there are large, this weekend I spent about 2 hours caulking cracked foundations. The larger wood joists in the floor are going, and you can feel it when you walk on it. You can feel the floor vibrating. If you get underneath, you can see where some of those floor joists, out where they sit on top of the foundation, have rotted almost to where they're not supported by the foundation anymore. We would really like to stop spending money on siding and spend money on what I consider to be some of the more structural issues here. The chimney is starting to peel away from the house. If somebody doesn't put major money into the house, it doesn't have much longer to go. It was built in like 1937, I think. So it's going on 100 years. We would like to do this to preserve it, because what we're doing now is every summer, June, July, August, we're spending about $800 a month on electrical bills. There's no insulation in the building, and we can't put it in because most of the walls are still plaster. So to put it in would be either to tear out the plaster and replace it with drywall, or go from the outside and take off the boards, and I'm afraid to do that because I don't know if the structure is designed to have that happen. In any event, part of what I would like to do is sort of lay that foundation in case we have to take a hardship appeal. We would really prefer to get the house watertight and then be able to work on things like the foundation. I have talked to a foundation contractor. It is possible to fix this stuff now. It's not cheap. And if we do what we're doing now, which is just trying to keep our head above water with the cladding on the house, we're not going to be able to get to those more significant issues. So with that, I'm going to yield the floor to my wife and my contractor and let them continue.
Hi, my name is Heather Lebedecker. I'm the owner. I just wanted to show a few things. You saw it on the video, our house, built in 1940, wood siding. I don't know, can I pass these around? We have it's contributing, okay? So it's contributing to
We'd like to show them this one. I'd like to show you this one as well. This is underneath the plywood, the condition that it was in.
I am now showing you, this is a house 2 doors to the west of us, 236 Grayman Drive, built in 1945. It has aluminum siding, and it is contributing. This house is 311 Monroe Drive, built in 1928. It has vinyl or aluminum siding, and it's contributing. .326 Monceau Road, built in 1940, vinyl aluminum siding. Oh, and by the way, we're not asking for vinyl aluminum siding. I'm just showing you that you're having homes that have siding that are contributing to the historical significance of the area that are not wood siding. 240 Almeria, built in 1949, vinyl aluminum siding. And then 207 Edgewood Drive, built in 1942, aluminum plywood contributing.
And may I ask, did you speak to the owners of these properties to find out what type of siding that they had, or?
No, I went onto the property appraiser's website.
Okay.
I did research, and I also went on to the Historic Preservation
map where it shows if each house is contributing or not to the historic relevance of the area. And I drove around and I
Okay.
put a lot of legwork.
Okay, thank you.
I also wanted to show you some, just for a comparison, I'll pass it around. The first house I showed you, that's 2 doors down from ours, that has the aluminum siding. The first two, I just want to show you what aluminum siding on a corner looks like, okay? And then this is ours, wood siding on the corner of the house, what it looks like. You can see that it is how deteriorated wood siding gets and how preserved this is. Now what we're asking, I'm going to pass this around. And we brought 2 samples of what we want, we brought samples of what we want and what the Historic Preservation Board, of what you guys want. And you'll see how similar they are. Aluminum vinyl siding, you can tell it's not wood siding. And so the things I just showed you, the homes I just showed you, it shows you that this isn't the law that if a house is contributing to the historical relevance of the area, it has to be wood siding. We found something, and we'll talk about the specifics of it, but it's like eco-friendly, wood rot, no. Termites, no. It's gonna last, and it looks good. If you look at the house, how it looks now, it's really worn down. And we're just trying to make the neighborhood look better, make our house look better. And, I'll just pass around. Here's some more photos of our house and the wood rot. If you guys would like to take a look. And one more thing before my friend George comes over. And I'm just looking at the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties, which he had said that we didn't meet standards 6 and 9. When you go into the standards, I just found a very, telling paragraph here. It says, the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties are regulatory only for projects receiving Historic Preservation Fund grant assistance and federal assisted projects. Our house is not. Otherwise, these guidelines are intended to provide general guidance for work on any historic building. So these are just purely, they're guidance. These aren't laws saying that you have to have wood siding. And if you look back, I'm looking at page 11, what's this? Imitative materials, talking from the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties. It says building materials are generally common, imitative building materials are generally common and readily available materials used to simulate a more expensive material. They have a long history in American building construction. Wood, cut and planed and sometimes coated with a sand paint, has been used since the 18th century to replicate cut blocks of stone on the exterior of a building. Stucco, applied over any kind of construction and scored to resemble stone, could make even a log house look elegant. So it just goes on. It talks about how since the 18th century, the building materials we have used have, been imitative in nature, trying to replicate other looks. So what we're asking is along the same lines, is we want to replicate the look of wood, but we're going forth in the 21st century, bringing the good and making it better and just progressing along the way. Okay? Thank you.
Questions of the applicant?
I think they're done, yeah.
Oh, okay. If you could speak into the microphone, so maybe you could have someone hold it up for you and you can, okay.
I brought 2 samples here. This sample here is what we want to use. This is the true exterior. And that there is the cedar siding. If you hit them, they sound the same. If you look at them, basically, they sound the same. And that's what we try to do here. We try to get something that's going to be very durable. Again, we're in South Florida, a lot of moisture. This here is going to hold up. Doesn't expand. This here shrinks. Also, there's oils in here, yes, for termites, but after a while, when the oils get dried, they no longer protect against termites, okay? This product here does. This product here, the paint adheres better to it, it lasts longer on this, opposed to this material here. Now, I've been in the business since 1982. I'm from New Jersey. I've been down here since 2013. We used to use a lot of cedar up in New Jersey. With today's products, my own house, there's no way that I would build a house with cedar siding with a product like this. And as you can see, anyone from the road will not know the difference, even if you came and banged on it. As a matter of fact, had we done this house and painted it, no one would even know the difference. Because like I said, if you bang on it, it sounds just like wood. If you look at it, it looks like wood.
Sir, the microphone, I'm sorry to be a pain. We're being broadcast on television.
I appreciate it. There's an issue here with energy preservation as well. And I know that you're the Historical Preservation Board, but this has such a better insulation value, and it will cut what we spend on heating and cooling significantly. On the other hand, if we continue to require people to use wood products, it's not just energy efficient. Most of those products come from tree farms. Most of those tree farms, in order to get the trees the size they need so that they can cut them and mill them, use pesticides, fertilizers, steroids. It just isn't, wood is no longer very environmentally friendly. And this goes back to the issue of the hardship. Since we can't put insulation right now in the walls, it would be nice to have something with some insulating value on the outside. And George, I don't know if you can speak to that further or not.
Well, I agree. But I mean, really what we're looking at here is for their own use and longevity, you have this polyash material. Give me a second here. I'm sorry. All right, this material is resistant to moisture, bugs, and movement. Most sidings, they expand and they shrink. Just like even with hardy board, as a matter of fact, when you put hardy board, you have to leave a space between hardy board because that will also expand and shrink. This material does not do that, okay? So without the shrinkage and the expansion, just that in itself, maintenance-wise, is a lot more durable. I think she already mentioned it. It's made out of fly ash material, 70% recycled material used. It's also endorsed by the USC, US Green Building Council for use in construction material. That's what the product is made out of. So, if it's my house, like I said, it was in my experience, I would definitely use that material over the cedar.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any questions of the applicant?
What are the dimensions of the, I guess the plywood you said, the existing siding that was removed?
I'm sorry?
The dimensions, because I'm seeing on the one that there's an arrow to and the Boral True
Talk about the exposure?
I'm talking about the nominal size of the existing or previously existing wood siding.
Are you talking about the exposure?
Yes, that's used for.
The exposure she had currently was 5 inches, and that's what I made this out of. This is 5-inch exposure.
Okay,
And we're planning on keeping it the same. So that doesn't change at all.
thank you.
Is the original siding still on the property?
No, it isn't. As we were taking, as a matter of fact, Heather has a video, not only the siding, but even the underlayment. I was actually able to take it out with my fingers. And she has a video of that because I was doing it while she was videotaping it. That's the condition that it was in. The siding was nailed on by 8-penny nails through the studs. So trying to take that siding out, and it was deteriorating, was impossible to do. That's why we had to get rid of the siding. Not that we wanted to do that, it just one thing led to the other. It's just like renovations. You come in to do a bathroom before you know what you're doing the room next to it. So that's what happened with it.
Have you worked in historic districts before?
I'm sorry?
Have you worked in historic districts?
Yes, I have.
Before?
Matter of fact, I used to own a building. I used to own several buildings in Easton, PA. And one of the buildings in Easton, the building was over 200 years old. And we redid the whole building, from windows to siding, to walkways, to window fronts, everything. Roof, everything. So yes, I have.
So going forward, I mean, obviously, we're kind of dealing with some issues here after the fact, but it's really important that throughout the project, that if you come upon any issues like this, that you communicate with the preservation planner so they're aware of the situation.
Okay.
So you're not kind of explaining everything to us after the fact. So I think that's important for you to know as if you continue to work in the historic districts here in West Palm, which...
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So have you already purchased this material?
Yes, we've purchased it. We actually had it delivered to the site, because here's the thing. The material is actually called cedar siding, by the way, okay? And when I got the material, I'm telling them, I said, it's not cedar siding, but that's what it's called. So, and you look at it, like I said, and you hit it, you touch it, you feel it, it is like cedar siding. It's identical to it. That's why they actually call it cedar siding. But we have to send it back. We actually sent it back. We sent it back. They're holding it for us at the site.
I want to speak to this because I don't want the board to think anybody's pulling a fast one, okay? It was delivered to the site. George was there. The guy had one of those, not a forklift, but it's kind of like it. He takes it all off the truck, he puts it down. George goes to inspect it. It's not cedar siding. The guy's like, well, it's cedar siding. So they take it all away. If you go to the house now, the only thing that's stored on the site is the wood that you use at the corners of the house. So we have nothing. And we are going to either have to put up wood siding or do something because we're in a little bit of a dry spell here. Hurricane season is coming, so I don't want this to drag out. And we want to get it done quickly. But as the picture showed now, it's wrapped in that bare, stuff, and we need to get moving on the project.
Okay. Do you have any other further questions of the applicant?
If I may?
Yes.
I just wanted to mention the applicant referenced the Secretary of the Interior standards as being just guidelines. That's not accurate, as the Code of Ordinances does adopt these Secretary of Interior standards into the Code of Ordinances and states that they need to be applied.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I will pass this, where I got my information, and then
But the city of West Palm Beach adopted, the city of West Palm Beach adopted the Secretary of Standards, so it's an official document.
Okay. I guess we kind of addressed this, but given that the original material is no longer on the property and the material has been purchased, what is staff's opinion of the compatibility of this material with the original?
All right, so as the guideline, the Secretary of Interiors are fully for full compliance, it does not, but however, it does say where possible for standard number 6. And the product is made with fly ash, which is technically a historic material because coal combustion has been a while for some time. So if the board were to approve it, they could approve it under Secretary of Interior number 6, and just please include the garage because that was not a part of the application or permit.
Okay. Any further?
I do want to say, I apologize for the garage. That was an oversight on my part, because when I filled out, can you hand me the permit? Yeah. Okay. The permit, the plans include just the front house, the front building, and I apologize. That was me just learning as I go and forgetting to put that on there. So I apologize.
Thank you.
I can do like another permit for that.
The permit will just need to be updated.
Okay, okay.
Now that all the original material is gone, would staff still hold to the second condition that the north facing side of the building be restored with wood rather than the proposed material?
That's up to the discretion of the board. If the board would like to go that way, that would be perfectly acceptable. But also for simplicity's sake, just doing the entire house in one material may be preferred for the applicant. That question may be better suited for the applicant if they're willing to do that.
Okay. Can you just reiterate I'm having a hard time hearing, or I don't know what is with the between the air conditioning or the microphones. Do you find that the proposed material does match the former material in terms of its dimensions and so forth, and is thus compatible with the Secretary of Interior's requirements?
Based on the research I've done regarding the product, it does seem to comply with most of the Secretary of Interior number 6, except the material itself. I did do some research on the product. It is a recycled material. Fly ash is a byproduct of coal combustion, which has been around for centuries. So it's not completely a new material. The polymers does encapsulate it. So the polymers are essentially what is actually new of that. And with the fact that all the original siding has been removed, while it would be preferred to keep original wood siding, that's not a possibility anymore. And new wood siding would be the preferred method. However, this is technically a recycled material. It's partially historically available, at least not in its current form. So if the board would approve it, number 6 for the interior standards would be the applicable standard.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, any further questions of the applicant or staff before we enter executive session? Okay, thank you and thank you. So we're now going to enter an executive session and just discuss it amongst ourselves. Okay. Yes. I'd love to hear our architects put you both on the spot, our 2 architects on the board.
Have you used this product before?
No.
I've only used Hardy Plank before, and
I use Hardy Plank also.
And I mean, as we know on Palm Beach, it's used quite a bit on historic properties, and I know on this board we have tended to approve it for additions, and that's part of differentiating the new from the old, and that's part of our rationalization behind it. I mean, I can tell a difference in the texture between the 2 samples, but just speaking for myself, I know that Hardy Board, a bunch of municipalities sort of wrestle with whether it's appropriate or not just for Hardy Board or Hardy Plank. I'm a little uncomfortable with a material that I've never used before or that I'm unfamiliar with. And not necessarily that it's not the original cedar or wood siding, it's this particular material I don't have a lot of information about.
Yeah, I don't have information about the material. I can tell you that Boral is a prestigious company. So all the materials that they do are, pretty good materials. They do a lot of cement tiles and ceramic tiles, a lot of cladding. I mean, it looks like we are complying with standard 6. Because standard 6, but we are not complying with standard 9. So standard 6 says where possible materials
as I expressed earlier, I think it's unfortunate that there was just a lack of communication with the planners, because I think that we might not be in this position
All right.
right now if there had been some communication and perhaps prior experience working in West Palm's historic districts or an existing relationship with the planners. So for everyone in the audience, it's always important to communicate with the preservation planners. If you have a question, they are very helpful and friendly. So it's always good to just go ahead and give them a call. I think this is also a difficult situation because we know that the materials are already been purchased, which is, I don't know, always difficult.
Well, it's difficult also if the comment about the thermal insulation of the other values of the product is true, which I am not sure.
I don't see anything in the material.
It's not there, yeah.
Yeah.
So then also puts us in a tough position, you know.
Yeah, like you said, this is sort of a fait accompli that puts us in a sort of difficult situation. And it just seems that the choices are, either make the applicant restore the entire house with wood and to fully comply, or to go with the new material. Luckily, the new material does look very good in terms of matching the historic material. It would have been nice to have that introduced to us at an earlier date so that staff could have done the research on their own, so we could have had a precedent to introduce this material for the future, but that's also not the case either. I don't know. And I think in terms of, this not being sure about the material, it's actually the applicant who is taking on the risk here. If it happens that this material hasn't met the test of time in our environment here, they're the ones that are going to be at the loss, not us. So in that term, we're really just concerned about the aesthetics of it. I mean, how much does this match what the historic material would be, okay? Which then places it in conformance with Section 6.
Okay.
I also think the point of old wood versus new wood, and the strength of old wood is much stronger, obviously, than the strength of new farmed wood, if you will.
Right.
So I think.
Yeah, there was all old growth material.
Okay. Would someone like?
Another choice would be to continue so we could review and explore this siding.
Yeah, problem they have the house wrapping, waterproofing and membrane, and they have to finish the project.
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise, I would otherwise think that that's a good idea, but again, you're putting pressure on the applicant. Like the applicant says, we're entering hurricane season. The material is ordered. Perhaps it's on site as well. They would like to get going with this. I'm not sure. I mean, they would have to answer whether they could afford to wait another month for us to examine the material further.
Well, I do think the point about the old growth versus what's available or readily available now is an excellent point, because we see that a lot in the buildings around here, and I think it's important for us to consider when historic materials are no longer readily available. We do have to consider what are the options that are most similar to the historic appearance of that.
I think we almost have to look at this as if it came before us, no longer having, as you said, the original materials, because in not that we really set a precedent with all the cases that we approve. I do think that oftentimes we are more flexible with property owners when the original materials are no longer extant, and unfortunately that is the situation.
Yeah, I think that you can argue about price, cost, per square feet or whatever, but in this case, probably the key element is the thermal properties of the material, if that is true. right? Because as a board of historic preservation, we should enforce to use the original material because cedar siding is available probably, right? So there is no reason not to use it.
Would someone
Same.
like to make a motion? Anyone?
I move that the Historic Preservation Board approve application number 19-24 for 220 Grayman Drive for alterations in accordance with standards 6 and 9 as set forth in section 94-49 of the city's zoning and land development regulations. The motion is based on the testimony presented along with the application submitted and the staff report, which constitute competent substantial evidence. The proposed alterations do not comply currently with standards 6 and 9, which state deteriorated historic features shall be repaired rather than replaced. Where the severity of the deterioration requires replacement or of a distinctive feature, the new features shall match the old in design, color, texture, and other visual qualities where possible. Standard 9 states new additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property. The new work shall be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment. The application does not comply with these standards. Therefore, the following conditions should be met in order to get full approval. Number one, the applicant, in using this new product, complies with standard 6 in that it is, I'm not quite sure how to word this, in that it is recycled wood. Does that mean?
Well, I think this new material, they've tried their best to match the original in the design and the color, not so much the texture.
Right, and you're saying that it does comply with standards 6 and 9, right?
Right.
Okay.
Well, I am now because of the, okay. And condition number 2 is that the applicant shall install siding that matches the original siding and profile with cedar, cypress, or old-growth pine if available. So,
And the garage.
and the garage as well.
Okay. So your application is to not let them use this product or let them use this product?
Let them use this product because
Okay, so
I
then
would ask staff
so then I don't think you want the second.
You don't add the
condition.
conditions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
No,
so
no conditions. It's just the application is for, so they're proposing to use this product. So you're just approving their application.
Yeah.
So no conditions.
Okay, sorry,
Yeah.
I just was reading this.
And
Okay.
wouldn't you
I think
also
we might
say,
need to restate that motion.
Yes.
I think
Yeah,
it might have been
restate
a
the
bit
motion.
confusing.
Okay, the whole thing? Or just?
Well, I think you stated that it does not comply, for one thing.
Well,
Then
the
move to
application.
approve it, so there might be a problem in the motion.
could we state that while it doesn't comply with standard 9, it does comply with standard 6, and therefore we're approving it?
I think you're going to need to apply the standards and find that somehow it meets the standards if you're going to approve it.
Okay, it has to meet most standards.
I would ask staff.
You can approve it as submitted with the garage under Secretary of Interior Standard number 6.
Okay.
You don't have to include number 9.
I think didn't you just contradict what our attorney said?
Potentially?
Let me just jump in. If you cite the specific portions of Standard 6 where it is compatible, and Standard 9 where it also works, so Standard 9, you could state the new exterior alterations will be differentiated from the old and are compatible with historic materials in feature, size, scale, and proportion and massing to protect the integrity of this structure. And for Standard 6, it meets it in visual qualities. And it does say where possible materials, so therefore you're still in compliance. So that the board has found it meets Standard 6 and 9
Okay.
with no conditions.
The application meets standard 6, which states the new feature will match the old in design, color, texture, and other visual qualities, and where possible, materials. And in standard 9, the new work shall be differentiated from the old and be compatible with massing, size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment. And no conditions will need to be applied.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, thank you. Moving on to case number 19-27, 336 Edgewood Drive.
Frederic Mittner, presenting case 19-27 for new construction at 336 Edgewood Drive. The subject property is located just east of the alley along South Dixie Highway on the south side of Edgewood Drive. The subject property is vacant at the front part, but does have a one-story non-contributing structure at the rear. The two-car garage was built in 1960. If the site seems familiar to the board, it's because last year there was a previous owner, an applicant, who presented a different set of plans for new construction on this site. So again, as you can see, it is bounded by the alleyway here, commercial properties that abut Dixie Highway, and then residential properties to the east. The request is to construct a new single-family residence of approximately 2,710 square feet and the rehabilitation as well as an addition of a second floor of the existing garage of approximately 340 square feet. The site plan, this direction to your right, is north, and the front yard features, again, this new construction of a single-family home. It does meet all side setback, all setback regulations, as well as lot coverage and floor area ratio. There's a pool between the main house and the proposed two-story cabana. You see the first floor plan of the primary structure, and then a smaller linear second floor, which gives it the L-shaped front elevation. These are the proposed elevations, again, north being the front facade, south facing the interior pool courtyard area. The east is what would be visible from the alleyway, And then the west is what's visible from the adjacent property. This is the detached accessory structure. You can see the two bays here on the west, which were previously garage doors. They would both be opened up. The northern bay would be utilized as a loggia and the southern bay as a carport. And then again, there is a second floor cabana space with a bathroom, but not a full kitchen, just a little wet bar, bath, and open area. This is the streetscape of the new construction, and we feel it reflects the massing of the mission-style homes in the historic district, as well as reflects the character of some of the contemporary homes, both contributing structures in the district as well as new construction. Therefore, reviewing the criteria for new construction and Secretary of Interior Standards 9 and 10, we do believe it complies and therefore are recommending approval. The only condition that we're suggesting is and not just suggesting, we will need to apply this when it comes for permitting, is that actually 2 off-street parking spaces shall be provided. Right now, just 1 in the carport is being provided, but there's ample room in the front for a small pull-off area and a driveway that would still meet all our green space requirements in the front. And we can certainly work on that site plan with the applicant at permitting. So we are recommending approval of the proposal of the new construction as well as the addition to the second floor to the accessory.
Questions of staff?
I have one. On the front, the left side in the rendering that we're looking at, there's the differentiation in sill height. Do you have any concerns with that as it relates to other historic properties or the language that's used in these historic neighborhoods?
So that particular detail was not found in the other properties, but I believe it does relate to the window up top and then the one to the left. So I think it's an appropriate feature for having that stair step for the sill height.
Thank you.
Has the space for the 2 additional off-street parking already been integrated into the plan design?
It is not what you're seeing this evening. Again, we just need 1 additional parking space.
Just
I've
one
discussed it with the architect, and they understand that that needs to be brought into compliance. So the site plan currently just has, again, that 1 spot in the back, in the carport, accessed off the alleyway, right here. This is where you access the 1 spot. But again, there is ample room for a curb cut adjacent to the alleyway, or it could come in this way. There's multiple solutions for that second spot.
It's not a problem, theoretically.
Yeah.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you. Applicant?
Good evening. My name is Anthony Harrington, Design Methods. I concur with everything that Frederic just said, and we're here to answer any of your questions.
So what references did you use in the neighborhood when you were?
There's a few, we wouldn't call them modern homes, but more, there's almost a few deco style homes. So we looked at it in more of the contemporary fashion of today and then saw some of those deco features that we brought forth and used that. The client was very interested in this style. And at first we realized as doing historic that may present an issue, but once we looked at it, discussed it with Frederic and made those considerations, I think we all felt comfortable with it.
And what was the thought behind the eyebrow on the second floor? It's just interesting that in the 2 places that it appears.
Again, using a little motif is setting forth as Art Deco. On the one, if you were to look at this, the elevation, the west elevation, behind that square little part, there's 3 windows. And we brought those in at a later point. In being a west view, I knew there was a heat gain situation. So we agreed that we'd like a little shading there. And once we put it there, it just looked better to wrap that box that comes out. And just a little construction method history, there's 2 different heights on the first to second floor to the single story. So once we got comfortable with the space, we needed just a little bit more space, or wanted to bring something out, so that box kind of represents part of the second floor and sits on top of the first floor, so there's a height change, and that's why, for other than architectural design reasons, it sits out and pronounces itself the way it does.
And were there any examples in the neighborhood for that, I guess, little bump out there?
No, I think that was just more of an architectural
Okay.
feel. If you were to look at it without that bump, you saw the first story and the second floor, and it was a very contrasting two spaces, and we thought it helped integrate the two spaces and added a little interest to it as well. And it obviously also solved an interior circulation issue.
Okay.
Are the windows operable?
Yes, they will be. They're just the bottom won't fix, but the top part, we're considering it as an awning. On the corner one, on the left, only the one with the transom or the sill window below would open. The two corner ones would be fixed. But typically, the top one is operable.
So an awning or a casement? Like, how would it open?
We're looking to use awning. We've got some elements that it may be casing, but right now we prefer awning.
Okay.
Are you in agreement with the condition for the additional off-street parking?
We are. That was brought to our attention very recently. I happened to be the one that presented the last house that was here, and we had a curb cut. So as you can see, as Frederick mentioned, in my thoughts, I would put it further away from the curb. In the picture you're looking at, we would do a curb cut east of the sidewalk and put a drive there. The client really wasn't looking forward to that, but I explained to him that we can soften it up as a turf block condition, something that has a driving surface but doesn't fully look like a parking space, because he's not sure how much he'll actually use it. Even though I suggest to him there will be times you're happy it's there.
Any further questions of the applicant? Okay,
Thank you.
Do we have any members of the public here to speak on this? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Eloise.
Oh, sorry, could you wait till you're at the microphone? And once you're finished speaking, if you could fill out a card just with your name and information.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
My name is Eloise Polk-Spivey. I own the 1932 home adjacent to the property we're discussing here. My house number is 332 Edgewood Drive, and I've lived there now for over 25 years. As a layperson, I do want to clarify that my research has been hasty. I received the notice on Thursday, 3 business days, and now I'm here. But that being said, the property in question has to be respected in the sense that it's the first gateway home, defining the border between the commercial and the residential. You've done an excellent job of making it very clear. I wholeheartedly appreciate that. Now, as far as logistics go, I was not able to find any layout in terms of canopy replacement for the tree ordinance. 2.5 years ago, I believe the gentleman's name, and you worked with him, was Stephen Cates. In the space of 2 days, this man took down an entire old-growth tree canopy that made up the entire lot. It was heartbreaking. None of us could do anything about it. He didn't ask your permission, and since it has not been replaced, this is a lot of cement on a very small sliver of property. 2 stories, 2 buildings, and a swimming pool. The point of my mentioning that is to ask what plans are actually going to be put in place to address some sort of replacement for that green that we take such pride in our neighborhood. That's what makes us different. You can't buy new. So, that being said, the second thing I'd like to come to, in light of the fact that this will be a completely cement-covered piece of land, where are the provisions in place for water containment? Where's the stormwater runoff proposal? I don't see plans for that. I'd like to know, since I do own the house next door, which can't be replaced itself either due to its age, but what provisions are going to be there? The alley already floods at the drop of a hat because the tree canopy was decimated. I want to know, what are you going to do about that? Because it could get serious in a hurricane. It's already a problem in thunderstorms, and my foundation better not be compromised. That's all I have. I'll be happy to fill out the card.
Thank you. I guess to address your first concern about the tree canopy, unfortunately, we have no control over the trees that exist on private property. Unfortunately, that's the situation. And we also have no purview over landscaping. But I think that perhaps since you've expressed these concerns, perhaps it's something you can discuss with the property owner, and they might be willing to share what they have in mind and something that can be discussed. As far as the stormwater and addressing runoff, that's not something we have purview over. Ms. Mittner, is that something that the city addresses in another?
For new construction, the building department will require a separate landscape permit to meet our minimum landscape requirements for residential properties, as well as a drainage plan, and those will be reviewed by the appropriate plan reviewers.
And how can this property owner get access to that information?
So we do have our permitting system is online, and you can track them, and it should be separate line items for each of those permits.
Would I go to city?
You would, and yeah, if you want to just.
Yes, would you like to respond?
Just to that, just to help out. As part of that drainage system, they require us to take all of the water that's on the property and direct it to the street. It can no longer, you may have water right now that is actually filtered into your property because of the way the property is set up. So I'm suggesting it may be helpful that once the property is reconstructed, everything will move from the street, not into the alley, but into the sewer system, of the stormwater system of the street.
Okay, thank you. And I believe I think that addressed your two concerns. To a degree. Yeah. Well, we appreciate your participation. Do we have any other members of the public that are here to speak on this item? Okay, and thank you for your response. Do we have any further questions of staff or of the applicant before we go into executive session? Okay, thank you. So I think we are seeing a lot more of these designs within the historic district, and I do think it's good that the massing is broken up. I'm not sure about the little bump out for the bathroom, but since I'm just trying to think of off top of my head. There's a house on Monroe that's like an art moderne, Miss Mittner? And I think it does it have some bump outs? I'm just trying to remember.
Somewhat. 140 Monroe, it's on the market right now. Yes, it has some of these elements on the second floor. And then there's also one on the west side of Washington Road that is a contributing structure that is similar in style.
Okay, and is that the Belford Shoemate
Yes.
house? Okay. Okay.
Yep.
I do like the corner window. I think that that's a good reference to the style and the eyebrow that I previously mentioned. Anybody else want to weigh in, share their opinions? No?
Like you said, at least in the photograph, it reads very well.
Overall, I just think that the massing is respectful of the neighborhood and the adjacent properties, and the scale is consistent with the neighborhood, especially considering that it's right next to the commercial corridor.
Mm-hmm. And even though I think that old gas station or auto body shop is not within the district, there is some contemporary design that relates between the two of them. So I guess it's a good transition into the historic district. Would someone like to make a motion?
I move that the Historic Preservation Board approve application number 19-27, 336 Edgewood Drive, for new construction in accordance with the standard of rehabilitation and the compatibility standards as set forth in the Historic Preservation Ordinance, Ordinance number 3554-02. The motion is based on the testimony presented along with the application submitted and the staff report, which constitutes competent substantial evidence. In addition, the approval of this request is made conditional upon the following restrictions, stipulations, and/or safeguards that I move are necessary to ensure compliance with the purpose and intent of the Historic Preservation Ordinance and the Historic Preservation element of the Comprehensive Plan of the City of West Palm Beach. The conditions include that 2 off-street parking spaces shall be provided.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Motion carries. Moving on to case number 3215, Vincent Road. I'm sorry, case number 19-28, address is 3215 Vincent Road.
Aaron Borgover, Historic Preservation Planner, Historic Preservation Case Number 1928 for an added loan pre-construction for additions and alterations to the main house as well as the accessory structure at 3215 Vincent Road. This is the project location highlighted in red. Here we have the request by Kimberly and Damian Barr for an add-on pre-construction with 3 different requests. A guest bedroom addition in the northwest corner of the 1925 contributing house measuring approximately 143 square feet. Windows and door alterations to all structures and elevations to include relocating, closing, creating, and modifying existing openings, and a rear addition to the existing rear 1925 contributing accessory structure. Guest house measuring approximately 302 square feet, and this property is located within the Prospect Southland Park Historic District. The image on the left shows the existing house on the east elevation that faces Vincent. The porch has already been partially enclosed with these awning windows. Here we have on the right the north elevation, on the west elevation, the rear of the structure on the left, and the south elevation, which is the side elevation, on the right. Here we have the cardinal elevations of the accessory structure. East elevation, which is visible currently and will remain partially visible, is right here. And the property immediately adjacent to the south is on the left, and the property immediately adjacent to the north is on the right. This is the site plan, and please note north is up. This illustrates the site plan. Currently, there is a proposed total side yard setback of 15 feet. The code requires 20 feet. The applicant is applying for a side setback exception, which will allow for a increased accessibility of a guest bedroom and bathroom. This is the proposed floor plan of the main house for the first and second floor. Here we have the addition right here and bathroom, which illustrates the increase in accessibility with the larger space, and north is to the right. This is the east elevation of the main house. Here we have the awning windows, which are to be removed. These windows that are portrayed here are actually to be determined. However, staff is proposing a condition to address that. The addition will be visible on the right. It will continue a parapet wall and the trim to continue that design and have 2 windows as well. Here we have the south elevation of the main house. The awning windows are being removed. For single hung windows, there's also a few window changes happening on the first floor, including removal of a window, removing a window and relocating it, and extending the windows. Here we have the rear elevation, or the west elevation. All the windows and doors on the first floor are being removed, and 2 nano doors are being installed. The addition will be visible, and the parapet wall and trim is continued. This window right here is actually located at a stairwell, and the applicant has concerns for safety, so they're proposing to raise that at the same plane as the remaining windows. Here we have the north elevation, which once again, the awning windows are removed, new windows are being installed. Elimination of a window right here, and this window is actually being relocated to be closer to the corner as illustrated. The addition, once again, is visible with the parapet wall and trim. There has also been a loss of a window, but 2 windows have been added on for the addition, and one of the window openings has been changed into a door. Here we have the accessory structure floor plan for the first and second floor of the accessory structure. Once again, north is to your right. The proposed east elevation right here, the existing elevations are on this side. The applicant is proposing new windows, which are all going to be impact products, and these 2 new garage doors. This is the north elevation, which features the addition with 2 new windows, one on the first floor and second floor, as well as relocating 1 window and adding a new window and continuing the parapet wall and trim. Here we have the proposed west elevation, which adds a new stairwell and new door and removes the existing window opening, and the addition, which primarily where the addition is. Then the south elevation, which this is the existing part in this portion of the structure, and this is the addition. It adds a nano door to the first floor, as well as 2 paired windows and a number of windows on the second floor. Staff has reviewed the criteria for additions and alterations, and it complies with the Historic Preservation Ordinance as well as the Secretary of Interior's standard number 9 and 10. The new additions are placed in the rear. Both structures are contributing. Their visibility is limited, and they are a logical expansion of the structure. While they continue the architectural style, they're obviously additions because of the way that they were added onto the structure for that. Staff is recommending approval of the ad valorem pre-construction with these 5 conditions. The first of which is all existing wood windows shall be recycled, donated, stored on property, or any combination thereof to preserve an irreparable element of this resource. The next one is all replacement windows where replacing a previous wood window shall match the original in dimension, trim, profile, and location in the window opening. The applicant shall revise the plans to comply with a total side yard setback of 18 feet. The single hung windows illustrated on the front east elevation shall be installed as illustrated, and a traditional mission revolving garage door shall be installed for each garage door opening. An example is provided right here. Thank you.
Questions of staff?
Is there going to be, I couldn't quite tell, a mixture of both old windows retained and new windows, or will all the old windows being taken out?
All windows are being proposed to be replaced with impact product. That is the reason for condition number 1, is to try to preserve wood windows in some fashion.
Okay. I could see from, the design where that might be appropriate, but, still concerned about the fact that we're, once again, jettisoning the old windows.
Can you explain the setback issue? Because that is a variance, and I want to know how we get to those numbers.
Okay, so the setback is actually not a variance. In our provision of code, it allows for a up to 2 feet exception for a setback for the side yard. And they're proposing using condition 9485 F3, which allows for the 2 feet exception if they're trying to create greater accessibility for a bedroom and bathroom on the first floor. So it's not a variance, it's just applying something that's already codified.
Because what I'm seeing in the site plan is that we have 5 feet on one side and almost 10 feet on the other side, in the best case scenario. So that is a 15 feet setback. and so it's not 2 feet, it's 5 feet.
Correct. So the total side yard requirement for this district and the size of lot is 20 feet. They're proposing 15, however, staff is not able to support that. So we are applying, the applicant is actually applying that side yard setback, which brings it down to a total of 18. And the condition, I believe it was number 4, will require them to revise the plans.
Okay, so revise the plans doesn't mean changing the number, it means changing the design to comply with the setback.
It will require them to find a way of probably shortening the addition by 3 feet.
I understand now. Well, yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does staff have any concerns that this is a tax exemption application and so many of the original window openings are being relocated or removed?
So as this is an ad valorem pre-construction application, as similar to last month, by right, the applicant could remove the existing windows and install aluminum. They're just happening to do that at the same time.
Not the actual windows themselves, the openings.
Right,
That those are being moved and.
correct.
Yeah.
But those are happening on the sides and rear elevation, and they're relatively minor movement.
Okay. And is there an existing circle drive in the front of the property, or is one being added?
There is not an existing that is proposed to be added. That I did not focus on the review because that will be handled separately, and the Historic Preservation Board does not have purview over the driveways.
Okay. Because I know historically we like to maintain the original location of the drive. Ms. Mittner, can you speak to that? I know there's like an exception when there's not enough on-street.
Well, actually, I think the applicant has done a good job. They're going to keep this, I think they're going to keep this as really the primary entry, and then it's going to be a ribbon drive. So it'll still read as more of the solid linear drive that would have been traditionally there, and just 2 ribbons. It'll be sod in the middle. So really visually won't be a circular drive as you're thinking of in more of a suburban setting. And I think it really does address the parking issue, especially on this street, which is very congested with on-street parking. But again, visually, it'll really just be that linear drive with 2 ribbons.
Okay, and that's not something that comes before us, because I know we have.
Okay. As long as it meets the zoning requirements and the pervious front yard area, we have not traditionally brought it to you or reviewed it.
Okay. Any further questions of staff?
Is there cooking in the guest house?
The accessory structure has a kitchenette, but does not have a stove or oven, so they're just spaces to wash dishes, have a refrigerator.
Any further questions of staff? Okay, thank you. Applicant?
Hello, my name is Jim Payne, architect representing the Barr family on this project, and they're here to observe several generations thereof. And I want to compliment Frederique and Aaron on the presentation. I don't really want to add anything except to address your one comment as to the relocation of windows. All the relocations are on the sides or the rear, and they're really random to begin with. And in order to modernize the interior and work the plan the way the family needed it, we had to move some around, but there was really no initial symmetry or order to those windows to begin with. So I think the proposed is just as appropriate as the original in terms of how the windows openings are organized on those elevations. And so besides that, I'm here to answer any questions.
Have you reviewed the conditions with your client? Are they amenable to the?
Yes,
What were there, 4 or 5?
they're in agreement with the conditions. Okay. And your question was a good one as to the site plan. Initially, we thought we had the 15-foot total like everybody else does on the street, but because their lot The site plan isn't up, but it's extra deep. It kicked it into a larger category that required the 20 total. And Frederick and Aaron were kind enough to say, the plans are already, everything's all set up for the presentation, let's just do it, but we'll make it a condition that you have to reduce the size of the room, which we're all disappointed about, but it's, unless we do go for a variance, it's the rules. And Frederick was kind enough to point out the extra 2 feet under the circumstances that we have. So we really lost 3 feet. We're at 18 feet. We're just going to have to live with it.
Any further questions of the applicant?
If we go to elevation, well, actually it's a rear elevation, so it's not really too important, but I had a question about the rear west elevation.
The west elevation of the main house?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, well, yeah, that window, or actually it's a Nana door, I believe. That bothers me a little, that is passing the edge of the wall above, but considering that it's a rear elevation, probably it's not a big deal, but that bothers me a little bit.
I see what you mean. The fourth part of that window.
Correct.
Away from the.
Now, that is the portion of the bedroom that you will have to shorten by 3 feet, so maybe you can do something with that anyway.
Let us look at that. When we adjust that plan before we come in for permit, and the first place it goes, of course, is to Frederick and Aaron, we'll look at that.
Perfect. Thank you.
I understand your concern.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any members of the public that would like to comment? Would the owners like to add anything? You don't have to, but you're welcome to. No? Okay. Okay. Seeing we have no public comment, we'll go into executive session. I'm glad to hear that the applicants are agreeable to the conditions that staff has proposed. And it's exciting to see a young family moving into this house and making such an investment in the home and the neighborhood. It definitely looks like you have a lot of work that you're going to be doing. And although I expressed some concern about moving of the original windows, I think that they did maintain the original elevation, so relatively minor. Would someone like to make a motion?
I move that the Historic Preservation Board approve application number 19-28 for alterations, addition, and ad valorem pre-construction in accordance with standards 9 and 10 as set forth in section 94-49 of the city's zoning and land development regulations. The motion is based on the testimony presented along with the application submitted and the staff report, which constitute competent substantial evidence. In addition, the approval of this request is made conditional upon the following restrictions, stipulations, and/or safeguards that I believe are necessary to ensure compliance with the purpose and intent of the Historic Preservation Ordinance. the historic preservation element of the comprehensive plan of the city of West Palm Beach, Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation, specifically standards 9 and 10. The conditions include the following. All existing wood windows shall be recycled, donated, stored on property, or any combination thereof to preserve an irreparable element of this resource. A replacement window, 2, all replacement windows where replacing a previous wood window shall match the original in dimension, trim, profile, and location in the window opening. 3, the applicant shall revise the plans to comply with a total side yard setback of 18 feet. 4, the single hung windows illustrated on the front east elevation shall be installed as illustrated. 5, a traditional Mission Revival garage door shall be installed for each garage door opening.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Moving on to case number 18-66, 3130 Washington Road.
Frederic Mittner presenting case 18-66 for the request of partial demolition, relocation of a house on the site, and new construction of a single family at 3130 Washington Road. The subject property is located on the east side of Washington Road in the Prospect Park / Southland Park Historic District, which is listed on both the local and National Register of Historic Places. This is a survey of the site, which currently has in the center a 2-story structure that was constructed in 1939 in the colonial revival style and is known as the E.R. Anderson House. It does have a covered breezeway connecting to a 1-story building that was originally a garage and has been turned into a cabana space. The subject property is difficult to see from Washington Road because of the foliage and the landscaping that is prevalent along this street in the south end of the city. So if you can kind of zoom in, you see that 1-story element, which does have a different roof line than this original colonial revival 2-story element. And then again, zooming out to the hedges along the street. These are the properties joining the subject site. This is the lot just to the north with their historic plaque right here. And then the contributing structure to the south of the property. Again, the request is for selective demolition of components of the existing house, relocation of the main house towards the front of the property, and then new construction of a single-family house. So this is kind of a rendering overview of the 3 components, and I'll break those down for you. First, the demolition proposal, which is selective demolition on the existing house. The applicant has provided detailed photographs of exactly what components are not original and why. That is mainly this 1-story family room addition at the rear, as well as this bedroom. Then this porch extension, and again, what is kind of a cabana garage space. On the second floor, there's also going to be some demolition to reopen what was originally a porch. Then the second component of the request is relocation. The applicant would like to then relocate the remaining component of the house, the original part of the house, to the front of the property, which would result in an approximately 48-foot setback from the front property line. They would then rehabilitate the home that was relocated. This is the ground floor plan. And then on the second floor, this now covered deck open to the exterior, which again, it appears that that's how it was originally constructed. These would be the new elevations, the existing and the proposed elevations for the relocated house after it had been, the selective demolition had been completed and it had been relocated. So that would be the front. Now the front door would be visible from Washington Road. The rear, where you can see these 1-story additions that the applicant is proposing to remove, would be restored back and then would be connected to the new garage space as well as the new primary single-family residence. The north elevation, again, would have the removal of this later flat roof addition. This is where the connector piece of a open air but covered walkway would be. And then you can see here in elevation currently the garage, and then that would be removed. And then finally, the north elevation would now be the connecting piece, this open porch that we discussed at the second floor, and then the connecting colonnade. This is a proposal, a visual of the existing house overlaid with the new house. So you can see it's in a very similar location from a site plan standpoint. And then this is the new construction site plan. So you do have the relocated structure here, the loggia connector, the garage, another connector, and then the new primary single-family home. The first floor, again, there would be living space in the relocated structure. This would be open air loggia, the 3-car garage, and typical family room, living room, dining room, and bedroom spaces on the ground floor. The second floor on the relocated structure, as you can see, is a smaller footprint. Then this is just an open space in here, a flat decking here, and then the second floor bedroom spaces. These are the proposed elevations. So the west elevation is what would be facing Washington Road behind the relocated structure. East elevation is what you would see from the Intercoastal Waterway. Then the north elevation, this is kind of zoomed into the new single family that's proposed, plus the 2-story garage element. And then if you include the colonnade and the relocated structure, you can see there is a hierarchy of the relocated house. It steps up a bit, and then from a roof line, finally the single family home. The south elevation also zoomed in for the 3-car garage and the new single family home, and then all 3 components together. This is a rendering of the relocated structure in the front. And as you can see, the new construction has taken its cues architecturally from the relocated house in the colonial style, having shutters that flank the windows, a 6/6 colonial pattern in the windows. It does have the siding on the second floor. They are proposing hardy board, and then stucco on the ground floor. The roof tile will be similar, so you can see there is a relationship with the new construction to the relocated structure, but also a differentiation. This is zoomed in on the front entry of the new home, and then the proposal as would be viewed in aerial from the Intercoastal Waterway. Again, the 3 components, all attached by a colonnade. Again, from the water. And then just a quick sketch of that. Of course, landscaping would be added to soften the appearance of all the structures, but again, it is not your purview, and so we don't have a full landscape plan to present to you this evening. Of course, that would be added. The streetscape of how the structure would work in relationship to the other structures on the street. Of course, there are significant homes, kind of more the estate homes in West Palm Beach. This would be the relocated structure, and then you can kind of see the roof line in the distance because it would be so far set back from the road, but it does have it is broken up in the roof line and the chimneys. Staff has reviewed the proposal in terms of the relocation, the new construction, the alterations. We do believe they have addressed all the criteria, as well as Secretary of Interior Standards 9 and 10. The only condition that we would propose to the board is that both floors of the north projection in the new construction, which is dining room on the first floor, bathroom on the second floor, shall be modified and planned to an octagonal shape to pay homage to the original breakfast nook in this location, because again, the breakfast area was here. That would also soften that north elevation a bit to the neighboring property, and then again, it would reflect that. But other than that, I know the applicant has gone through a few iterations. It meets all floor area ratio, lot coverage, and setback requirements because it is such a significant sized lot in the SF 14-C5 zoning district, and therefore we are recommending approval.
Questions of staff?
What are the precedents for relocating a contributing historic structure like this on site?
I don't believe we have done it. This lot actually had this proposal in front of the board many years ago, and it was not supported by the board. Staff was in favor of it at that time. We're recommending approval again. There are some flood mitigation issues with this structure. We also think it's a very sensitive and sensible solution to such a large estate lot where you're bringing this up towards the front, making that the showpiece while still addressing the needs of these properties with more significant square footage in the back. So we don't have a precedent for it, but I do believe it is appropriate. The orientation has not changed, and again, it is not hidden behind a new structure. It's actually brought more forward in prominence.
I'm not sure this is relevant in this case, but I know up north in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, homes were moved around all the time. They would cut homes in half and put one in one place and one in another place, go over to an island and stuff like that. So
Yes.
it's, you know,
I mean, there's certainly times that
appropriate for the time period.
contributing structures are relocated when they're threatened by erosion or sea level rise in those instances, but specifically for West Palm, we've really only relocated when an entirely other lot was in question.
How does this setback compare to other properties on the street? Like, what is this going to do for the streetscape?
I'm going to let the architect address that more specifically, but this, the new primary structure is set back as far further than most other primary structures.
I think I'm more interested in the relocated, but.
So the relocated is about 48 feet and about, sorry, 38.9.
Okay.
To one corner. The other one's further because of the angle.
Okay. Okay, do we have any further questions of staff? Okay, thank you. Applicant?
Good evening. For the record, Rafael Saladrigas with Studio SR Architecture. I'm here with my partner, Rafael Rodriguez, and Mr. Heiniger, who is the owner of this property and the property directly to the south, and Don Scouron, the landscape architect. I just did briefly, I really have not much to add to what Frederic presented, but I did want to clarify some dimensions for the board. To the corner of the proposed relocated house, it's 38.9 feet, and then 50 feet, 2.5 inches to the corner that is at an oblique angle. The main house is about 28 feet, 11.5 inches off of the northern property line, with the exception of that dining room, master bath area that Frederic pointed out that she wanted to see in an octagonal shape. It's 54 feet, 11.5 inches from the corner property line off the water, and 38 feet, 9 inches to the single-story loggia off the property line to the water. This, can I hand this out? This is the reworked octagonal plan for the master bath that Frederic is suggesting we incorporate. You know, Mr. Heiniger really doesn't have an issue with it. And with that, we'll open the floor to questions.
Questions of the applicant? I guess if you could address how the setback of the historic structure that you're proposing to move relates to other properties.
Well, I think
in
we'll
the
have to scroll
vicinity.
back to the aerial to
Okay.
sort of see that. It's a little bit difficult to maneuver this mouse, but you can see, it doesn't go all the way north, but you can see this property here that, is pushed very close to the street. And then there's, generally speaking, a line that starts to diminish as you go further and further south. In other words, the properties that are to the south are closest to the street. The properties, as the properties lengthen and deepen, the houses are a little bit more off the street. But there's no definitive pattern to speak of between here and, say here. So in discussions with Frederic, the number was approximately somewhere between 40 and 50 feet. That's what we were playing around with. And it settled on 40 feet, largely because we wanted to move the entire structure a little bit further to the west so that the neighbors to the north have a little bit more view of the water and they don't feel like the house is sort of looming over their property. Did you have something you wanted to add?
I don't know if that microphone works.
Come on up here, Sean.
If you wouldn't mind coming, you could come over to this other podium. Thank you.
Hi, for the record, I'm Sean Heiniger. I think the requirements for setback on Washington Road are roughly 35 feet. There are some homes that are as close as 15 feet on the north side of Washington. So we've done everything we can to accommodate the neighbors, and also with Frederick's request to keep the house as far back as possible.
Okay.
Yeah, I may add that homes on the west side of the street are significantly closer too. So, it's normally you'd get into that missing tooth pattern, but if you look at the aerial, there's not a definitive line that we can point to and say, okay, here's where the house should be. So a little, some of it was feel about exactly where it should be moved to.
And then as far as a property wall, the wall almost sits behind the relocated structure. Is that?
There's a portion of the wall that's in line with the face of the structure. There's an indentation created for a car to be able to enter, through a gate, much like you would have in an estate. Thank you. Right. So, see if I can get the mouse here. This wall is obviously aligned with the structure. This is the gate into the property. There'd be a call box here for the family or any visitors that would come through. And this wall is right on the site, and it's part of the request and agreement with the neighbor to the north. And Jim and Lila Young are here, and I'm sure they'll be speaking about this as well.
Are there any examples that you found on the street where there was this type of situation where the wall was not in front of the main, one of the structures? Because I think when I'm looking, my familiarity with driving the street is that they all have a property wall with a home sitting behind them.
Yeah, I mean, there's walls all along the street, and if it were a requirement of the board, we could move the site wall. But one of the things we wanted to do is present a little bit more of a friendly face to the neighborhood. We wanted to give the ability that, for people to actually see this cottage. I mean, we're going to the effort of relocating it. It's a beautiful historic piece in the neighborhood. Walls can also be created through landscape, and Mr. Scouron can speak about that as well. But maybe we could do some kind of a tiered system where it was a lower wall and some landscape behind it, and then a more of a security wall further back. Mr. Heiniger is telling me that if a wall is what the board would desire closer to the street, he'd be happy to do it.
Thank you. I'm also just making observations, just kind of talking it out. So I think that it is a departure from, what we normally see. So I think it's important that we, really consider how it's going to affect the overall streetscape
I understand.
of the historic district.
We just, I think a wall can be made friendly. We just didn't want to put a wall at the street that conveyed that this was like some kind of compound. And so one of the things that we discussed was sort of, tearing landscape back, creating some kind of an edge in association maybe with some lower walls that might be able to affect the same thing. But again, if the board wants a 6-foot wall out at the street, we're happy to do it.
Well, I think for me, it's how the plane, there's no differentiation in the plane, so you have like a site wall that connects right into the house instead of it. For me, I would almost want it set back just a step so that it reads more as, right now it's not really like a gate in the front. It's not a wall in the front and it's not a wall in the back. It's just sort of somewhere in limbo. So I think I would actually prefer if it went back a step so that you're not reading it with the same plane of the house. And that way you still get, I think, what you're going for, the connection with the street.
See if I can.
But maybe our reaction is just the detailing of that wall maybe needs to be finessed a little bit more.
Well, to explain a little bit more about our thinking, one of the things that we looked at was really making this cottage feel like it is sort of a separate house, having its own driveway, having its own arrival, its own approach. Notwithstanding the fact that you think that the wall should be moved back, which is a perfectly acceptable concept, but we did want to sort of have the house that's being moved be a focal point of the street. So there are different ways to do that, different ways to think about it, but again, it's entirely up to the board how you want to handle it. And maybe Don would be better to sort of explain, how we might be able to introduce some landscaping that would affect the same.
I think we have a general understanding of how landscaping can affect a design.
Okay.
For us, for me at least, I'm looking at the architecture of that. I understand that things can be, your field can sort of change with landscaping, but I'm an architect, so I'm used to looking at stuff like this. And for me, I don't want to get too hung up on just the sidewall because there's other things I'd like to address. Sort of the overall massing is, I know that you're within what you're allowed to do, but it is quite large, even in comparison to other large structures just in that row along the water. But I would like to hear you speak to like the loggia colonnade component that you have that's connecting these two masses, just your rationale for that. I know that there's something sort of similar right now, but it's a pretty large component of your design.
Right. Well, thank you for asking that question. In our conversations with Frederique, she wanted us to sort of create an homage to the existing umbilical connection, from the existing cottage to the house. So we took that to heart and tried to incorporate it into the colonnade that leads back to the guest house. And, we wanted to maintain the rhythm of the garage entries all the way back to the house to, create a nice sort of geometric, understandable connection to the cottage.
How visible is that breezeway from the street?
I don't think it's going to be very visible at all. I think it's all going to be internalized because it's really kind of hiding behind the cottage. And do you want us to pull up the floor plan on this? There you go.
The street does curve right there, so the landscape, but you would be able to see it if we're just talking in terms of architectural components.
Yeah, and by the way, from a zoning standpoint, we can't really make this an accessory structure. It has to be, connected for us to be able to get.
What is the width of the loggia/colonnade component?
From the garage back to the cottage?
The width, not the
The
length between the two.
The width is about 12 feet.
Okay.
It's large enough for the person in the cottage, to be able to lay out some furniture there and sort of use that space directly in front of it as yard space where the two families, or like mother-in-law, father-in-law, relatives, friends can meet in the middle. Yeah, that's it. Sean has a lot of extended family, and they come and stay for long periods of time.
Lucky you.
By the way, I do want to mention that this will be on over an acre of property.
What is the beam height of the colonnade?
10 feet.
And of the contributing structure, it's 8'6" for your first floor, is that right?
It's 10 feet to the second floor.
But
I'm sorry, it's 10 feet 6 inches to the second floor. But you have to remember the colonnade is set down from the finished floor of the cottage. So there's a displacement between the finished floor of the walk-up and the finished floor of the cottage.
So I'm looking at the connection, I guess, on either the north or the south elevation between the beam height of your colonnade and where that hits in relation to the contributing structure. There's a pretty significant discrepancy in that scale.
I'm sorry, say that again? In this drawing? Wait.
You can look at the proposed, I'm on sheet A2.04.
Yeah, unfortunately, she doesn't have the sheets on here, but
So it's a zoomed in, I think it's more difficult to see on the screen that we have up right now versus what I'm looking at in our packets. It's a zoomed in view of the contributing structure and the connection to the loggia. And I'm talking about the difference in scale, how those two meet.
Well, do you want to say something?
No, the way the via meets the existing structure, is that your question?
Well, I'm just pointing out that there's a major difference in the language and the beam height sort of that are used between those two. It's just a comment.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, yes, the colonnade beam height is obviously lower than the height of the beam at the garage, partially because we're mitigating the jump from the old cottage to the finished floors of the new house. So that beam does get a little bit deeper across the face of the garage, but you have to also remember that you're looking at this two-dimensionally. That's set back significantly from where the garage face
and
is.
That's not my comment. My comment is it's a relationship to the contributing structure, not to the garage.
Oh. Well, it's.
Do you have aerial view too?
Let me see if I
think you
yeah,
can
let's see if I
also
can
see
pull
it
up that
if
photo.
That's a three-dimensional, but you can see how it really like overwhelms.
Is this helpful?
I mean, it just shows my point.
Okay. Well, this is the area that you're talking about?
Right.
Okay.
The connection, I'm not really sure how to say it another way. The connection between the two I find very dissimilar. Or
It seems out of
abrupt.
proportion.
Abrupt.
It seems that I think what you're saying is he's continuing the language of the garage and that's more important than making sure that this is compatible with the contributing structure.
Right.
Well, it depends on where you're looking. I mean, obviously, nobody's going to be looking at this from an aerial view. The pitch on this roof is exceptionally low. It's at about a 2 and 12 pitch. And if you look at where the actual beam, the curved beam and the column hit, it's significantly below the point at where that upper porch is. I mean,
Yes, I mean, it works from a construction standpoint. I'm talking about from a historic standpoint, making sure that you're respecting. I think it almost would need to, and I don't want to make suggestions for you, but it almost needs to just be reduced in scale at some point along that span so that you're meeting the contributing house in a more respectful way.
well, we could look at that. We could work with staff and get that a little bit lower. If, maybe, reduce it a foot, 2 feet, whatever it really requires. I mean, obviously, we want to respect the proportion of the distance between the columns, but those can be adjusted as well.
And you said the driving motivation for this feature was to recreate what's there at this time?
Well, it was suggested by Frederic that we create some kind of an homage to the original umbilical connection from the garage to the main house. And, we felt like this was a good way to do it.
Do you feel that it's functionally necessary? I mean,
Well,
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it does
Was there
provide.
zoning? I apologize if I misheard, but I thought there was also a zoning comment about there not being, did you need to connect these structures?
So you have to connect them?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And the reason for that is our code only allows a 1,000 square feet maximum for a detached accessory, and that exceeds even the original components after you've done the selective demolition exceeds the 1,000. So it has to be connected with a solid surface. That doesn't mean that the colonnade can't be reduced in height or scale, but it does physically have to be connected with a permanent roof.
The cottage after the selective demolition is going to be about 1,830 square feet, both floors. So it wouldn't meet the 1,000 limit. And we looked at that very early on.
So you would be comfortable if we made that a condition of approval that you would work with staff to
Absolutely.
work with this, to finesse it? And
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, designs often are a moving target. This is our first sort of presentation for this, and I mean, we think it's well thought out. Are there things that we can adjust? Absolutely. I think your comment is well taken.
Okay. Did you have any other?
No, but if anyone else would like to.
I think your comments are very valid.
I think that you can see it in the proposed east elevation for the cottage. You can see what she's talking about in that elevation.
See if I can maneuver. Here?
No, for the cottage. There is an east elevation. It's kind of elevation section of that area. There's this one here.
It's not in there.
Fortunately, we don't have that one here.
Yeah, it's not here. I don't know why. Well, this is the west elevation, but it doesn't show the connection. Not sure why. I mean, you can see it here that could actually be lowered a little bit.
I think that is also what she is referring is to the language of that colonnade when it meets the historic house.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not only the scale, but the language.
Well, we certainly don't want the connection to overwhelm the cottage, which was, I think, one of the reasons why we wanted to put a low pitch on it that was a little bit, different than the other pitches on the house. So, but again, we're happy to work with staff to get this satisfactory.
And I apologize if you already addressed this, but what is the pitch of the historic structure in comparison with the new construction?
It's about 4.5 and 12 versus 7 and 12 to the new structure.
Are there any other structures that are along that portion that are that same 7 and 12 or right around there for your
Well,
pitch?
there's one that's sold just down the street that had a very high pitch. That one actually could be higher. It could be 8 and 12. And then there,
Is that
you know,
new?
I'm sorry?
Is that new?
Is new construction, yeah. And then there are, you know, multiple British colonial homes throughout West Palm Beach that have that.
The reason I keep asking about that portion right along the water, it's very particular. The sort of the language and the massing, the contextual setbacks that we were talking about earlier, are very specific and unique just to those. I mean, I don't know if it's a dozen homes right there. So what may be appropriate in that section may not be as appropriate in other areas. It's just a very unique area.
Right, and they're just a smorgasbord of homes along the water. I mean, you have a couple of doors down, an ultra-modern house, and then you have right next door to that a Mediterranean Revival house, and then you have, you know, Sean's house that's a 1930s Med Reb with deco detailing. Down the street, the house that just sold is a British colonial. It's sort of a pseudo-British colonial. I mean, it has some more modern antecedents, but... and then you have, for instance, Jim and Lila's house, which is next door, which is like a single-story little cottage, you know. So it's hard to put your thumb on exactly what is this. You know, we've always felt like this British colonial West Indies style home is a type of architecture that is understood sort of throughout. True from the Secretary of Interior Standards. You know, of course, making a connection to a historic property, the standards call for some differentiation too, so.
Yes. Do you have any further questions of the applicant? I think we have quite a bit of public comment, and you've all been patiently waiting. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you. I have Ralph Mitchell.
Hi, my name is Ralph Mitchell. I live at 3307 Washington Road, a block south and on the west side of Washington Road from Sean and his new property that he's going to work on. I'm here to support him. I've been briefed 5 times by him in the past year, once in a public forum of the Homeowners Association where he brought the plans in and did a detailed briefing for us and allowed us to make comments. Not that we were the committee, but he allowed us to comment on everything that he presented to him. So I think he's done a great job with due diligence. He's gone to his neighbors, he's gone to the homeowners, he's gone everywhere and really tried to do what pleases them as well as him and his family. And I think that's just commendable. Regarding his house, you know, I'm a layman, but as I look at the plans for that house, if it looks like a duck and acts like a duck and quacks like a duck and is as pretty as a duck, then why not build 2 more of them? So you've got the one house there that he is trying to keep true to the historical standards of the house, and he's building 2 other structures that to me look very much like that original structure, the cottage. So as his neighbor, I'm thrilled to see what's going to happen there, and I give my heartfelt support to what his plans are right now. One more thing, when you're talking about a wall or anything that's on the west side of the house, please keep in mind that next year, the Washington Road project is going to be in full force right in front of his house. And they're going to widen the road, they're going to put bicycle lanes in, and it's going to change that west side of his structure, of his property, a little bit. It's going to change it a little bit. Some trees could come down. It's still being discussed and hadn't been finalized, but there is something going to go on when he's doing his construction. So please keep that in mind. It's not finalized just by this group, but by the city as well on their Washington Road project, which has been approved and which will happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. Actually, Ms. Mittner, are you aware, I'm hoping you're part of these conversations?
Yeah, actually, the engineering department has really been taking the lead on the Washington Road project, but I believe they have reached out to the neighborhood. So I really can't speak to the final product.
But if they're widening the road, that's going to change what the setback is.
No, the property lines are not changing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where are they, just between where the sidewalk is?
I believe that's where the modification is, but again, I really do not have enough information to discuss.
Okay.
But possibly the
Yes,
applicant
sure.
can.
So,
Hopefully they've
wait,
told you more.
Frederic? So, you also wouldn't know whether there are any takings as part of this? Have they
As far
filed
as
a
I'm
map?
aware, there are no takings.
Okay, there are no takings?
It's all within the existing roadway
Is it within
and
the existing,
sidewalk.
the
and-
changes will be made within the existing right-of-way?
That is my understanding, but again, the neighbors may actually know more.
Okay.
Yeah, the intention of the city is to actually increase the width of the sidewalks to 5 feet on each side to increase foot traffic and meet the disability provisions. They're also going to add a bike lane on each side of the street. And the way they're going to accomplish this is they're going to narrow the road to 9.5 feet in each direction. So increased foot traffic, bicycle traffic, what they call mini micro transportation functionality, and then also as a means to try to slow the traffic down, they're going to narrow the lanes. That project's supposed to start July of 2020.
Okay, thank you.
And I think that the city of West Palm Beach measures the setbacks from the back of the curb, I believe.
Okay,
So if the curve remains what it is, then the setback remains what it is.
okay.
And your 9.5 feet, just for your information, is a significantly substandard travel lane. You know, normally would be 12.
Absolutely. I mean, considering that.
Sorry. Just for anyone watching at home.
Yeah, I'm not an engineer, but absolutely it's going to create a calming effect. They believe they've done a lot of flow studies on this. So the only reason I know about this is because I'm involved in the neighborhood quite a bit and was just at the commissioner meeting this morning about this topic.
Okay, thank you. Lila Young?
Sitting too long. Good evening to all. I'm Lila Young, 3120 Washington Road, Sean's neighbor, and I'm hoping everyone had a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. I have to tell you that the gentleman that's family we bought our little home from on Washington Road there, the little one-story, tiny little place that we've loved for about 33 years now on Washington Road is next to 3130. It was the home of Colonel Achilles Tisdale, and he was in the death march of the Bataan and somehow survived it. And so I respect a lot of the local history and people who live there, like Dr. Brandon, who was in Sean's home. Your local history buffs might also remember that Colonel Tisdale had also owned the handsome Manalapan Meisner home that was cut into 3 pieces and moved from its lakefront perch to Harbor Branch and was kept there on the ocean until they could find a lot for it in Palm Beach for the Meisner Beauty. And the 3 sections of the home were then floated back down to Palm Beach onto the land, and most unfortunately, the 2 owners could not agree on a situation, a compromise, an agreement, whatever we want to say. And the wrecking ball came and destroyed that house. Seeing that happen made me realize in such a big way that there are times when you have to compromise, when you have to resort to an agreement, a gentleman's agreement, a verbal agreement, a written agreement, and much like in this case, it was give and take for Sean's family and ourselves, and I can understand them with their family wanting larger rooms and expansive bedrooms and bathrooms and closets, and Jim and I just wanted to preserve our little tiny shack and to see Dr. Brandon's preserved, because I feel like it was a 1939 historic home, and he lived there for years, and the equestrian center is named out after him on Forest Hill. I thank Frederic for helping save that home years ago. This isn't the first time Jim and I have come here before the Historic Board to save this home. We've had 5 different owners next door to us. Sean and Ashley are now the 6th. And I think their new home is very in keeping with the Brandon Historic Home. I think the 2 Raphaels have done a very nice job of making a tranquil setting for both the West Palm past and the West Palm future. Things are changing along Washington Road. It's not just started now. It's been coming. We've given Sean and Ashley a list of 10 agreement items to help us both progress in a positive vein, and they seem to be in step with Jim and I verbally, and will hopefully shortly be in writing. And I think we're all faced with a lengthy construction, and our little home will be dwarfed, but hopefully it will not be drowned because of stormwater runoff, because they've agreed to the wall. And I'm so glad that they have a landscape architect involved, and that Sean has agreed to let me keep the existing trees that I have, because I need that as a buffer. I'm going to be facing a lot of concrete that I never saw before, and I'm okay with that as long as I can keep my trees and nobody hurts my trees. And I would just hope that we can go along with this and have it all be that we have our little slice of heaven, they have their large family home, and hopefully everybody can be in agreement with whatever changes are there, because Washington Road has changed dramatically. We've had that property for 33 years, and it's coming and it's changing, and that's life. Thank you.
Can I just add a follow-up comment?
Sure.
I'm not sure if it was included in your packet, but we did hire a civil engineer to help mitigate any concerns that the Youngs have.
Great, thank you. Jim Young?
Good evening. For the record, name is James Young, 3120 Washington Road. We live next door to Sean. We're here this evening to discuss a proposed project at 3130 Washington Road, and my wife and I simply desire not to be inundated with issues from the construction of this combined old and new home project. We know that this size project will take more than 18 months to complete. We met with Frederic, the owner, and his 2 architects to discuss the project. We had a good meeting. We know what they are allowed to build and the plans we reviewed and the issues we discussed that will directly impact this, and we have been verbally accepted by the 3130 property owner. We have requested those concerns be put in a written agreement shortly, and the agreement contains 10 specific items. If the property owner provides and adheres to the agreement, it will make dealing with the partial demolition, move of the existing home, and the construction of the new home a little more palatable. We would like to make sure that there will be no water runoff onto our property, no damage to our seawall or to our structures, and that all specified agreed upon trees and landscaping are to remain undisturbed. In closing, we can only wish that this property proposal goes as planned and agreed upon. And we thank them. They've been working very diligently with us and putting up with us as well. So hopefully everything works out fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Kelly Holmes?
Hi, I'm Kelly Holmes. I live at 3209 Washington. I'm across the street and a couple houses down. Like Jim and Lila, I've seen quite a few owners come and go from this property, and we're thrilled with how much time and effort Sean and Ashley have put into preserving this house and moving it. It's a great solution. I think it looks beautiful, and I hope you guys will vote to approve it. I also would hope that this can be precedent for if Jim and Lila's house ever were to sell, that the same thought and care goes into preserving that house. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Hillary Moser.
Hello, Hillary Musser, 3200 Washington Road. I'm the previously controversial first modern home that went up there. And I would just like to say I'm very enthusiastic about Sean's plans. I think that he incorporated the old and the new extremely well. I personally looked at that home many years ago to buy. It's really not in great shape. It's very cut up, as Sean, has pointed out. It's been added on to many different times. It's no longer in its original, form. I think that seeing now the 3D version, I'm even, more enthusiastic, than I was in seeing, the flattened plans. I think it's a really pretty house. I personally will be seeing it from my upstairs bedroom. And my bathroom every single day. I mean, I look over onto Sean's 2 yards on a daily basis. We wave at each other. So, it's a very tight neighborhood there in the back where we, see each other's kids play, and especially from my house, we're so tall, I can see there. So I'm all for it. I think it's terrific, and I think he did an incredible job of, of making it look as authentic, bringing it back to its original luster, and then making the rear look as authentic, as possible. I think it's really pretty. So I'm all for it. So thank you.
Thank you. Judy Flynn. Did she maybe have to leave? Oh, she wrote a note on here. Totally approve. It will be beautiful. Just so you all know, for the record. So I will say that's in favor. And Mark, I'm sorry, I don't want to butcher your last name, but Mark Sanderson. Okay.
For the record, I'm Mark Sanderson. I'm at 3180 Washington Road, and what Sean's done is a beautiful job. However, I have to object because it violates the deed restrictions that we all live by. I bought my house, and I was aware of the deed restrictions that prohibit a building that far east. And that whole plat was created to have certain views, and now those views are being violated. So on that basis, I have to object to it. And other than that, I love the project. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would you like to respond? Would the applicant like to respond to that?
Yeah, Mark is my neighbor to the south of the home that we currently live in at 3140. The plat restriction that he's referring to was put in place to restrict boathouses from going up in 1920. Since that time, the property line has moved almost 40 feet because it was backfilled, pushing the water out much further. And honestly, is a private matter between himself and his neighbor to the south. I don't think it has any bearing on what we're doing. We're clearly not blocking any view for Mark. In fact, Mark and I do have a visual easement that we've agreed to on the house that's directly north of his. And because the water line, the wall line goes west, there's no obstruction with this new house.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Mittner, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Just that the city, by policy, does not enforce those kind of referenced setback lines. We just enforce what's in our zoning code because this has happened in the south end of the city as well. And our city surveyor has always indicated that is not a regulatory approach. It's just on older deeds.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other members of the public that wish to speak? Sir, have you been sworn in?
No.
Okay. And was there anyone else? I guess it's a little after the fact, but anyone else that needs to be sworn in? If you could stand and raise your right hand.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right,
Thank you.
My name's John Prince. I own 3027 Washington for the last 9 years. I moved my company here actually from California. We have about 100 employees downtown. And I drove around the state trying to find the neighborhood that was going to be good for the business, but also good for my family. We chose this neighborhood due to its greenery and the really comforting feel for family and the uniqueness of all the properties in the neighborhood. So I'm here to show support for the design. I think the property will continue in that spirit of uniqueness, and I think the property there, honestly, when I walked by, it never really struck me as that unique, with all due respect to the history, which I wasn't privy to, but it never really struck me as one of the properties in the neighborhood that gave a lot of uniqueness, but I think this new design will enhance the neighborhood and create value for everybody. So,
Thank you.
Hey, good evening. My name's Doug Brown. I'm at 3109 Washington Road, so on the west side and just a little north of what Sean is proposing. And just really 3 points pretty quickly. First of all, I think you hear everybody talk about what Sean's done, the work he's put in on the front end to reach out to the neighbors, both on the west side of the street and on the same side of the street. And I think it serves as a really good example, a very neighborly example of how we should go about these kinds of changes. So I credit Sean for taking the strides that he has there. Secondly, I think Lila hit it on the head. You know, it's such a beautiful, unique neighborhood, but you know, it's in such a beautiful place along the water that you are going to attract that type of this type of project to really kind of beautify it, and so to really respect the history of it, but also find a compromise, to improve it, I think is really well said by Lila. So, and then finally, I would agree with what John just said. It's not really that unique of a property as it stands right now. So I think it's really a very creative way to have it really add to the neighborhood. So I'm in total support of it, and I'm very impressed with the work that's gone into the design. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dora Pacunas, and I reside at 311 Westminster Place. And it's a historical home. I've lived there 23 years, so I've seen the whole neighborhood change. And this is just a beautiful addition to our neighborhood. I've also known Sean since, full disclosure, junior high. So I know he's going to do a beautiful job. And they're kept to the scale because it is just stunning. So I just want to, show my support for the neighborhood. And I also owned a property on Dixie, so I'm very involved in the neighborhood with a business too. So it's a nice addition to the whole neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll go into executive session. So I know we wanted to add one condition. Well, I don't know if everybody feels that way, but it seems that the applicant was willing to work with staff on the colonnade to make sure it's historically sensitive in the way that it meets the contributing structure. Was there any other items that perhaps you'd like to address? Or obviously, I think we have pretty great support within the neighborhood, and I commend your efforts in communicating with the neighborhood. I think that's very important. So the one condition by staff is that one projection that it have an octagonal design to reference the original breakfast nook on the contributing structure.
So-
and then the second one that
It's a staff condition.
Yes, that's the staff condition. And then the second one pertains to the colonnade that attaches the contributing structure to the garage. And just basically the height and to make sure it's proper scale.
Is that a board condition?
That's something that I believe a couple of us are recommending. That is something that's up for discussion, and obviously whoever makes the motion can choose to include that or not. I'm just reminding the board of what we discussed earlier. Any further discussion? Would someone like to make a motion?
Okay, I move that the Historic Preservation Board approve application number 18-16 for, I'm sorry.
18-66, I
Oh, I'm
believe it
sorry,
is.
what am I saying? I'll start all over again. I move that the Historic Preservation Board approve application number 18-66 for ad valorem pre-construction in accordance with standards 9 and 10 as set forth in section 94-49 of the city zoning and land development regulations. The motion is based on the testimony presented along with application submitted and the staff report, which constitute competent substantial evidence. In addition, the approval of this request is made conditional upon the following restrictions, stipulations, and/or safeguards, which I move are necessary to ensure compliance with the purpose and intent of the Historic Preservation Ordinance, the Historic Preservation element of the Comprehensive Plan of the City of West Palm Beach, the Secretary of Interior's standards for rehabilitation, specifically standards 9 and 10, which state new additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction will not destroy historic materials, features, and spatial relationships that characterize the property. The new work will be differentiated from old and will be compatible with the historic materials, features, size, scale, and proportion and massing to protect the integrity of the property and the environment. Standard 10 states, new additions and adjacent or related new construction will be undertaken in such a manner that if removed in the future, the essential form and integrity of the historic property and its environment would be unimpaired. Okay, and let's see. Additional compatibility criteria set forth with section 94.49 of the city zoning and land development regulations. And, okay. And the conditions imposed are both floors of the north projection, the dining room, first floor, bathroom, and second floor shall be modified and planned into an octagonal shape to pay homage to the original breakfast nook and its locations. Secondly, applicant will work with staff to reduce scale of the colonnade connection between the cottage and garage.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion approved. Thank you. I believe,
Thank you
Dan,
very much.
thank you. I believe, Dan, you had one item that you wanted to bring up that's not on the agenda. You just wanted to,
Yeah, that's
something for future study. That Dan mentioned to me right before the start of the meeting.
Both today and some recent incidents in the past 2 months, we've been kind of confronted with situations where an application did not meet the Secretary of Interior standards, yet yet staff recommended that an approval be made. And I find that sort of disconcerting and problematic in the same time. I feel that it puts the board here in a commission of, in the position of trying to work this out during the course of a meeting and not always coming up with the best sort of solution. It would just seem to me that if an application does not meet the standards, that should be addressed at the staff level, and when the application is brought before us, that there'll be a denial right off the bat. That either it would be reconciled beforehand, or we'd be presented with a denial situation. So in other words, when an application comes in and there are problems like that, the applicant should work with staff to put it into conformity, and if that can't happen before it comes before us, that we deal with it as a denial.
Okay, so for this evening, just so I believe I understand what you're saying, but just so this evening you're referring to the siding?
Right.
Okay, so
Okay,
we
and
did.
we had a couple of those before too.
Okay, so we
Last
did
month,
not.
I believe we had something, and the month before.
So we could have.
And that's never happened before, as long as, at least as I've been here.
Okay, and we can make that, we can change the wording to denial for that. It was approval to replace all the siding if it matched the original. And then we felt it would have been compatible given the situation.
Right.
So we weren't, I don't think we were presenting a conflicting statement
No, I
there.
understand that, but I think that stating that something is not in compliance and then recommending an approval, even approval conditions, is inherently a conflict. I think it has to be one or another.
And I do understand where you're coming from, but I think if you read the whole Secretary Interior Standards book, and the guideline component of it, and the preservation briefs that go with it, there is some flexibility built in specifically for that purpose. That's actually why they reprinted it with the words should instead, or may instead of shall, because there were so many situations that were unique. But if you'd like a more stringent denial recommendation, we can move forward with
more
that, if that's
stringent,
the way
or
of the board.
as you've been just discussing just now, if there is a conflict between meeting the standard and approval, it says you should have language to the effect, okay, this does not meet the standards, but staff recommends that with the following modifications, approval can be obtained, and these are those conditions which will be stated in the.
Okay, and I believe that's what we were doing in presenting, for example, the siding case. If you meet these, it does meet it. If
Yeah.
you meet these conditions. So maybe we can talk after the meeting for more specific examples. I think I understand what you're saying, but I'm not sure on which ones that would apply.
That was just one example of what happened today, but like I said, since I've been here, I don't think I've ever come across that situation before, where we have both an applicant not being in conformity with the regulations and being asked to approve it with certain conditions. I don't think that's happened before. I mean, the other members here have been here much longer than I have. I don't know if you've come across that, or if you find that an issue. It's just something that I find to be an issue. Does anybody else want to say anything?
I'm just trying to think. I think a lot of times you're trying to make kind of a philosophical point with how you word things in your recommendations. And I think sometimes there's additional facts that may not be in the staff report that you're aware of that kind of come out while the applicant is speaking. And I think there's just a lot more at play. There's so many variables that to have a blanket policy on how a staff report should be worded. I don't know if that gives them the flexibility that they need, if that makes sense.
Okay, I guess all I'm saying, it might be a private issue. I'm willing to own that. If nobody else feels that way, that's fine. If everyone else has been comfortable with these situations like that, then I'm fine with it too, you know? Team player.
No, but of course, we want to provide more clarity if that's what you're seeking, and we're happy to do that. I guess,
See a difference, though. If you look, for example, at 220 Grayman Drive, it says in the packet the proposed alterations do not comply, and then it goes on and says, therefore, city staff's recommending approval with the following conditions.
and those conditions would bring it into compliance, which is exactly what you're
But I think
asking
you
us to
should-
do.
But you should have words to that effect, I think.
If you look at 3215 Vincent Road, it says, it does comply, therefore staff is recommending approval with the following conditions. So in both cases, you have approval with conditions, but one says it does comply and one says it does not comply. So it's not necessarily in the same format, which I guess can be confusing when someone's making a motion and goes to read from here and reads does not comply.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know. That's how I would
Okay.
Yeah.
maybe see
Okay.
I mean, that is part of my thing,
Okay.
you know?
Okay.
So I guess either format could be seen as correct as long as it were the same. I don't know. It's not.
Yeah, I know, it's not.
Okay, I can see the distinction that one's a not and one's a yes. The idea was both conditions will bring them into compliance. But I understand. We will refine that.
Right, and as like you said, just one sentence would say that, okay?
Okay.
It doesn't comply now, but with the following conditions recommended by staff, we'll bring it into
Yes.
compliance, therefore we can approve.
Yes, you're right. There needs to be that transition sentence. I believe we used
Right.
to include that of this is, to address these concerns of staff, we have included the following, and that's how it used to be worded. We'll make sure that gets added. Thank you for pointing that out.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for keeping you all later.
That's okay. Thank you. So the meeting is adjourned.